Well, nice to see you again in an unmusical appearance.
Thank you, Don.
You did very well. What happens with someone in your position at the moment? What exactly can you do here, Mr. HAWKE?
Well, Don, I obviously cancelled our campaign for the day because that was obviously the appropriate thing to do. And I got in touch with John. I stayed in touch with John during the day and with John Bannon in South Australia. And of course, while it's proper and appropriate, and I applaud the Prime Minister for travelling around, as he should as Prime Minister, to the areas, it seemed to me that people knew how I felt about things, and it was probably best, seeing as I have a pretty large press entourage following me, that it was not appropriate to go into the areas, because I think the facilities that would have had to be made available to help me do that were much better used either fighting the fire or helping the victims of the fire.
And this is the time to think about Australia and not personal objectives, obviously. Yes. Does that... It sort of surprises me a little bit. Everybody seems to be at everybody's throat during things like this, but when there's a time of crisis, somehow we all seem to let go, and everyone seems to pull together.
Yeah, well, you just couldn't help but be proud of being an Australian today. Not only the response of people, but the response of some of the victims was magnificent. I remember seeing on one of the programs this evening a lady called Connie, and there she'd lost everything, and she said, well, we start over again.
Yeah.
And it's great.
That is the way, isn't it? I think it is the way of Australians anyway. Say, okay, well, I lost it, so I'll do it over again. I mean, it's not the best, I suppose, but at least it's a direction.
Well, I think it's fair to say that politically, Australia is divided. And I'm not too sure whether this is true of other countries, but in Australia we have that special spirit we're talking about, that when the chips are down, we can combine as one. And that's a pretty important part of our makeup, isn't it?
Yes, as long as we know that the challenge is there, and as it obviously was yesterday, Australians will respond, that's right. And it just has been magnificent, as shown on your program tonight, on what, $1 million?
Absolutely, almost,
fantastic.
Yeah. What about your first impressions, Mr. HAWKE? When you hear something like this, do you, what's the first things you think about it?
Well, I think probably I was like everyone else in Australia, that you didn't immediately realise the dimension of it, just how huge the disaster was, but then when it started to hit you, you just felt staggered that so many people had lost, how many people had lost their lives, and the staggering number of millions of dollars worth of property that had been lost, and future resources in terms of forest and so on. It's one of the great disasters, one of the great natural disasters in Australia's history. Those things don't hit you immediately, it just sort of gradually builds up. And this is where television is such a fantastic medium for helping our understanding. I don't think anyone could have watched television in the last day and not just be staggered by the enormity of what's happened.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, may I ask you, and I'm not slighting you by doing this, but may I ask you please to join part of our appeal, and would you ask those people at home, especially the people that are your backers, if they would contribute to this?
Well, it's not just a question of backers. I think this goes right across. I would first of all like to congratulate your program and your network, congratulate them sincerely, and say to all our Australian people that there are times when events transcend all political barriers. This is certainly one of those occasions. I appeal to everyone, not just those with whom I'm associated, but to all Australians, to remember the plight of other Australians, many of whom are not in a position to help themselves, and please dig deep, and as I've indicated to John Kane and to John Bannon, and through John it's been passed on to Malcolm Fraser, that the people of both states are to know that what is being promised is backed up by all of us. What's being promised by Mr. Fraser is a promise from the government and the people, and what governments can do will be done, and I hope that you will back that up by very, very generous donations.
I thank you very much, Mr. HAWKE, Mr. Kane. We're going over to Darrell Summers.